So I recently experienced what I would describe as unambiguous answers to prayers, even miracles, you might say, that really reaffirmed and encouraged me in my own faith, as well as the need to turn to God in our struggles and in the things and for the things that we need. And I wanted to share these stories with you in part because they're somewhat amusing, and it's always nice to have something affirming from time to time rather than dwelling in all the criticism and negativity that's out there, but also because I wanted to encourage you. These don't prove anything about God necessarily. They're my own personal anecdotes, but they might encourage you to seek God in the same way and have your own personal revelation, your own personal encounter with the Lord or with the supernatural. So if these do pique your curiosity, if you're perhaps a non-believer, or you've gone through perhaps a dry spell in your relationship with God, which is something that we all experience, I hope that these will encourage you to seek Him and to find Him in meaningful ways. Okay, so the first story is kind of silly, but no less profound for me in my own experience and what it meant to have this prayer answered for me. So I'll just share it. It's kind of embarrassing. So I was traveling recently on a plane. I'm not a great traveler either, I might say. I like to be at home. I like to be with the familiar. I get motion sickness really easily, and so traveling on a plane can be kind of a stressful thing. So that's the context. Now, on this particular flight, it was a longer flight, I think 4 or 5 hours. I was sitting on the window seat and in a row of 3 seats. So there were 2 people next to me in between myself and the main aisle. And about halfway through the flight, I had been sharing a lot of conversation with the person next to me. She was a lady who had been traveling for a very long journey. I'm not going to say from where. I don't want to give her away or anything, but she had had a long day. Let's put it that way. And we had been having a friendly conversation, which was nice. You don't always get that on flights, but that's what we were able to enjoy. And about halfway through the flight, she started to fall asleep, and I felt happy for her that she was able to get some rest after sharing that she had had a really long day. And I thought that was fine. But then all of a sudden I realized, I'm starting to get the urge to have to go to the washroom. And I thought, it's not a big deal. We're halfway through the flight. It's not very strong, but I'm not in my 20s anymore. And the urge can come on fast and strong, as it did in this case. And so 15 minutes go by, half an hour goes by, and I'm like, wow, this is getting really urgent. What am I going to do in this scenario? I'm going to have to ask her to let me get out. And I feel so bad because she's getting some rest and she's had a long day. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to have to wake her up and disrupt her rest in this way. And so I'm kind of going through the scenarios in my mind. What am I going to do here? How can I best navigate this awkward social situation? And then I realized, it's a long shot, but why don't I pray? Why don't I pray that God does it for me instead of me having to be the villain in this scenario and wake her up? And so I said a very innocent prayer internally. I just said, God, if you could spare me from the catastrophe, the social catastrophe that is being imposed upon me, I'd appreciate that under the circumstances. And I kid you not, within seconds of mentally saying amen to that prayer, the guy in the seat behind her started moving around, got up and moved around and bumped her chair quite violently so that she was startled awake. At which point I was able to say, hey, since you're awake, do you mind if I just sneak out real quick? And I was rescued. I was saved. The Lord saved me that day. Now, again, that's kind of a silly story and it seems insignificant, but under the circumstances, the worst case scenario, I would have had to have woken her up and we all would have survived that. But to pray for something so specific and to have it so immediately answered on the spot felt like God was looking out for me and He was present, and that was a profoundly obvious answered prayer in that scenario. Okay, the second story is less silly, It may seem kind of trivial to some people, but if you're a parent, I think that you'll appreciate the significance of this. So we recently had a child, a new son, back in September. So he's young. He was a newborn. Obviously, he's almost 3 months old now, and navigating those first 3 months comes with a lot of adversity for parents. Your whole life gets turned upside down. All of your routine is just laid waste. You aren't getting sleep. A lot of your commitments are not being met, whether it's work or friendships or your other children, and just your general domestic life is just chaos for those 3 months, and it sometimes gets extended beyond that. And so you have to understand that we're in survival mode. My wife and I have not been getting a lot of sleep. And then on top of it, we all get sick in the family. And we're a big family, so these kinds of things tend to take a while to resolve and sort themselves out. And sure enough, our infant son, John, gets sick as well. And watching a newborn be sick it's kind of heart-wrenching and it's stressful. And in this case, he gets completely congested and is unable to breathe through his nose. Now, I don't know if this is common for all babies, but this is certainly true in our case. They can't consciously breathe through their mouths. They don't know how to do that. They just rely on the reflex. And in the case of our son John, his reflex was to breathe through his nose. And when he couldn't, he would sort of gag and then gasp for air through his mouth, and then cry, because it's obviously an unpleasant experience. And so this is what had been going on for him for some time. And now we're trying to settle down for our evening or our sleep routine. And he's not able to go to sleep because he can't breathe reflexively. He can't just rest and sleep. He has to constantly go through this routine of gagging and gasping for air, which is unpleasant to watch. And you start to wonder, is this going to become a danger for him if he tries to go to sleep and he can't just naturally breathe properly? And meanwhile, my wife and I are very, very tired and looking to get some sleep. So I said to my wife, why don't you try and get some rest, and I'll take the first shift with him and try to get him to go to sleep. And the only solution I have to try and help him fall asleep is to rock him. So I'm walking around, I'm vigorously rocking him by myself downstairs in just the dark with nothing else to amuse me. And this is becoming quite a strain on me. I'm very, very tired. I've been rocking him for a good half hour to 45 minutes. My back's getting sore. My legs are getting tired. One thing I resorted to was going up and down the stairs, because that sort of vigorous motion tends to put my kids to sleep. But in this case, it didn't, because again, he still can't breathe. And all it did for me was completely exhaust me and tire my legs out. So now I'm at this point where I just have to sit down with him and sort of tolerate him gasping and crying. And in a moment of desperation, I turned to God and said, God, please, I can't do any more here in this scenario. I'm out of options, and I could really just use a miracle right now. And it would also ease my concern for him and the potential danger that he's in, because he can't breathe right now. And so I laid my hand on him and I said, please, Lord Jesus, in your name, I just pray for healing for John. Could you please open up his airwaves and relieve this congestion? Please, in your mercy. And literally on the spot, I hear his airwaves open up. And he calms down and he starts breathing. And because he was so tired as well, he hadn't been able to sleep for a long time, I didn't even have to get up. I'm just holding him in the chair, which is pretty unusual for Holdsworth kids. They usually need to be rocked to go to sleep. And I just sit with him in the chair and he almost immediately calms down and falls asleep. Now, there aren't many times in my life where I've really witnessed what I would describe as a miracle, but I would describe that occasion as a miracle. It's not as significant as someone being, cured of cancer or some other life-threatening illness, but it was a healing that I observed on the spot that I there's really no way to explain. For hours, throughout the whole day, in fact, he had been suffering from this condition. And then at the moment of prayer, it went away and his congestion was immediately relieved and he was able to start breathing. Like I could audibly hear it and witness it and see him calm down and fall asleep on the spot. And so that's a moment with God that will probably endure and stick with me. It certainly has throughout this week since it happened, and has really encouraged me in my own faith. Now I know it's anecdotal, and there are probably people on the other end of that story who could say, well, maybe this or maybe that, or they could come up with rationalizations for this not being a miracle, and that's fine. Again, this isn't proof of anything. This is my own personal story and my own anecdote. But I hope that it might at least pique your curiosity to try to seek the Lord in prayer for your own miracle or your own answered prayer. Not all prayers are answered. That's not the formula here, but sometimes they are. And the reason God does it is to encourage us in our faith. And so I dare you to do that. Experiment for yourself. Ask God to give you some relief or to answer some particular prayer intention that you might have. And who knows? Maybe he'll answer it for you like he did for me. Okay, thanks for watching. These videos and this channel are only possible because of viewer support. So if you can spare some help, please consider making a contribution through my website at brianholdsworth.ca or join my locals community at brianholdsworth.locals.com, where you can interact with myself and other like-minded individuals. We actually just started a monthly Zoom meetup where we're studying some articles of St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa. So if that's interesting to you, then come join us there. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.